Good evening and welcome to the Journey Home program. I'm your host, JonMarc Grodi, filling in for my father, Marcus. He'll be back next week. But once again, we have this wonderful opportunity here on EWTN to hear a story of how the Lord has brought another person home to the fullness of the faith in the Catholic Church. And we have a wide variety of stories here, but some more than others really give many of us in the audience, and the host included, an insight into aspects of the human experience and the Christian experience around the world that we don't always get to see or hear about. And that's the case with our guest tonight. Phally, Phally, how do you say your last name?
Phally Budock.
Budock.
Yes.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm really excited to hear your story tonight. It's a little different than many that we have.
Yes, not a typical story.
Yeah. But again, as always, I'm going to step way back and invite you to go back to the beginning and start us off on your spiritual journey.
Okay, well, it's a long story, but let me start with my childhood. I was born in Cambodia. I'm the youngest of 10 children in the family. I was around 4 or 5 years old. As I recall, living in our home in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. It was a very, very beautiful home in terms of our family dynamics. The love was just fully, immersed in our house.
Yeah.
Our parents, they were very loving folks. My mother was raised Catholic.
Okay.
She was part Portuguese. She was 1/4 Portuguese, and 3/4 Cambodian. She was raised Catholic. All her siblings practiced Catholicism. Her mother used to take her to church, when she was a young girl every Sunday. And I learned late in life that, she stopped attending Mass for various, reasons. She still prayed to God at home and taught us about Jesus. I remember clearly during, whenever there's Christmas time, that was the highlight of my childhood.
Yeah.
Because the 3 things I remember from Christmas was Noel, means Christmas, because we were under the French influence at one time. So our language was French mixed with Khmer. Second word was Pré Jésus, which means God Jesus. The third was Gado, which means presence. So the last one was really, exciting to me because presents, and the colorful lights. My dad would have, our house strung up with lights. It was just so festive. Our house like a little heaven. I don't remember much being outside the house, but just being inside, enclosed in our home. That was everything that we needed, and Christmas was, that time that was just such a joy that I remember so vividly to this day. And those 3 words just echoed my heart throughout, my childhood through adulthood. And we always celebrate Christmas. My dad, not sure how immersed he was in Christianity, but I learned from my mother, and just by, remembering how he was, my mother said he was, very biblically influenced. When my dad and my mother were married, they lived with my mother's older brother, who was very enriched in the Bible. He was Catholic. Most of my mother's siblings were Catholics. They all were raised Catholic, but some, didn't really practice the faith. My mother, I called her Catholic by example, as opposed to Catholic in name, just because I don't remember us going to church or, her praying the rosary, anything like that, but I always remember her praying all the time. And her telling us about Jesus, the Nativity. Clearly, I remember that from childhood. Over the years, well, actually, my childhood in Cambodia was very short-lived, because not long after, the country was invaded, by the Khmer Rouge regime, and we were forced out the house. I was, at this time, age 5. Everything just turned upside down. I remember clearly we were forced out of the house, and the whole family, my parents and 9 of us, I'm the youngest of 10 children. I say 9 because there were 8 of us children and my sister's husband. The other 2 children were already out of the country. My parents sent them abroad to go to college, one to the US, my brother, and my second oldest sister, who was the second child in the family. She went to France to attend college there. So the remaining 8 children and the brother-in-law, and along with our 2 parents, were forced out the house. So we were packed into this one car, trekking along, the traffic of everyone else that were directed to go toward the north part of northern side Cambodia, which led us toward the jungle. That was the purpose of the regime, to force us there and, start the genocide.
What about the time period was this?
This was 1975.
1975.
Yeah, and it started exactly April 17th, 1975. Wow. And it lasted through until early 1979. Wow. Okay. Right. But we didn't get far, within I think a week. We took rest along the way, and I remember the whole family resting near the temple, one of the Buddhist temples. And all of a sudden, a jeep of soldiers came, fully armed, told my dad, come with us. We need you to help us reorganize the country. And I remember as a child, my instinct was, oh, they're going to hurt my father. All those weapons on him. So I started to chase after him, and my mother quickly just scooped me into her arms and said, don't cry, Dad's coming back. Don't worry, he's going to work. Those guns, they're protecting him. So she twisted around and, to try to comfort me. Yeah. And I did stop crying. But fast forward a little bit, before we even reached the jungle, my brother-in-law was taken away. So a short background of the objective of the Khmer Rouge is they were out to get rid of all the educated people. And because my father was high profile, he worked as a governor of one of the provinces in Cambodia during his early years. And then later he became president of an agricultural bank. So he worked, in the government. The bank was operated by the government. So he was a liaison between, the bank and the government, and just finding different innovations for the farmers. Instead of using manual labor, what's the best way to enhance, agriculture for our country to better the economy. So, and we were like a huge target because of that. Everyone knew my father, So after they took my brother, my brother-in-law, next they took my next 2 brothers. They were ages 16 and 17. So now all left were all women, and one brother of mine, he was only 8 years old at the time, so they weren't really focusing on the rest of us. So when we got to our first camp in the jungle, a lot of things, were just happening, and me as a child didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
Why are we here? Where's the food? Hungry and everything, and just chaos. And my oldest sister, whose husband was taken away after my dad was taken, she was with child. So she was getting ready to go into labor.
Wow.
And there was nothing, imagine just pure jungle.
Yeah.
Like Tarzan, consider that. So my mother delivered the baby with her own hands. Of course, we all malnourished. My sister couldn't produce milk. The baby died within 2 weeks. So we were moved from that position to the next place. That's when one of my brothers, who was captured, escaped and found us. And he was telling us what happened when they took him and the other brother to where they to this site. There were a lot of other people they brought along, and they would ask a question: "Do you know how to read and write?" And if you said yes, they would separate you to this side. If you said no, you go to this side. And the one who escaped said no. So he said he never saw my brother, the other one, and the rest of the group. So he somehow was able to escape and found us. He was so sick, starving, everything. He died in my mother's arm within like a week. Yeah. So next, we transitioned to the third camp. That was the final camp. That's when, more family members start to die, one after another. And at this time, I was around 6, 7 years old. And by the age of 5, they will take you. They'll come and patrol around, your house. And this little shack we lived in, my mother built out her own hand. They allowed her to stay home because she had sick children. But at the same time, they made her work for them, tending to this garden in front of her house. But if you're there to pick anything to eat, and to feed your family, they will shoot you right then and there. And so my siblings, my sister, this was a horrible memory of witnessing her death. She was going through the woods, trying to find food. So she found mushrooms growing on, tree trunks. So she picked them and roasted them and ate them, and she got poisoned. And she was just screaming, hollering for help. And I'm sitting there, helpless, couldn't do anything for her. My mother could hear her, but she couldn't do anything. Yeah. So 15 minutes of screaming and hollering, to me, it was like eternity, and I just couldn't do anything about it. And that really affected me later on, in my teenage years and adulthood. So she passed away. The next person was my brother. This is the last boy in our group. He was 12 years old at the time, and I saw him take his last breath. And my job was to go to my mom. He's gone, she's gone. And she would come and wrap her child up. She would bury each one of them right in our house. Yeah. So that was my experience during the war. And we were freed during, I think it was late 1978. And all that was left of us was my mother and her 3 girls. And I almost died. I actually, I think back, I know the Lord saved me for a reason. Mm-hmm. I literally almost died 3 times. Mm-hmm. My mother saved me all those 3 times. Mm-hmm. And, but we made it, and it was quite a journey. Escaping from Cambodia to the Thai refugee camp was really intense in the sense that, you trying to cross the border and trying to escape getting killed by Thai soldiers. But my mother's faith, so strong. She never gave up her faith. She somehow had this gift of being able to hear God audibly. I remember we were going to leave on a Friday evening. And we chose evening because it would be dark outside and, there's less chance of us getting killed and noticed. And then she came and told us, her daughters, no, we're not going to leave on Friday. I heard a voice, God said to leave on Saturday. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, what is Mom talking about? I don't understand this. She's hearing things, I just couldn't comprehend. But, we all follow along with her because she was our leader. Yeah. And so we left on Saturday, and we crossed over and made it to, actually, we crossed from one camp to the other camp because the first camp, it was difficult for us to enlist ourselves to be sponsored by my brother who was living here. Mm-hmm. So we had to cross over to the other camp. And it was dangerous, it was very dangerous, but we made it there. And when we made it to the second camp, that's when we learned that those who made the crossing on Friday, they were shut down. Yeah. And after that, that's when I said, you know what? Well, I wasn't surprised anymore. Whatever my mother told us, that, whenever she said, I heard a voice, I listened.
We're joined this evening by Phally Budock, and again, what an incredible story so far. So you've made it with your mother and your sisters to this second camp, and what happens next?
So we were sponsored here to the U.S. by my brother, who, like I told you, he was sent here by my parents to go to college. And he sponsored us here. And coming here, I stepping my foot on the soil of the USA was heaven to me. It was such a freedom that I felt that I just wanted to forget everything that I had ever witnessed during the war, anything about Cambodia. And I refrained myself from contacting any being in touch with any Cambodian. None of my friends were even Asians, because I used to think, wow, if we're gonna kill each other, I can't be around you, It was an issue of trust for me. Sure. Not just Cambodian people, but just Asian in general. So my friends were more any other nationality but Asian. So growing up, in my I came here when I was 10 years old, 1980, by the way. Okay. And my brother was, he was, he had a good job, was able to support us. He took well care of us. He was my legal guardian because my mother, she suffered so much trauma and health conditions and everything else that, he took over in terms of education for me. But being in this neighborhood that we were living in my early teens, I experienced such diversity in terms of my friends. And at the same time, I was just so immersed in the American culture. I knew about the church. Actually, we lived right behind the church. It was St. Catherine of Labouré. Okay. And a lot of my friends, they play sports at St. Catherine. A few, went there. And I would just hang around the church a lot, Until one day I was asked to be on the girls' softball team. And I was like, don't I have to go to school here? And she said, well, no, we need more people. Come on, come join us. Without asking my mother or my brother, my guardian, anybody, I said, yes, I'll do it. Now, I was a very active child, a tomboy, big time. And so I signed myself up, played softball, and just did everything else and just loved being around there.
Yeah.
My mother, would tell me, be careful, going out there, and and she would just pray, for all of us, and telling us, about God and things like that. And then that's when I said, I wouldn't say to her, there's no God, anything like that, but I was confused.
Right.
Said, why is Mom still talking about God and, praying to him, talking to him? Where was he when, our family members died?
Right.
So I wasn't, connected to God in that way. And just for the core reason that he let our family die.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. But at the same time, I just couldn't understand my mother either. Why is she praying nonstop? Asking God, forgive me, for it's like the forgiveness part, if anything I've done wrong, or, she would pray for Cambodia, forgive those who killed, and not just I, but my siblings, like, we used to get upset whenever we hear my mother pray and saying that. It was like, she shouldn't be praying for them like that. They deserve to, hope God would do something to, punish them. So my thing was revenge, There's no forgiveness in that, so, but she never stopped.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes we would, go somewhere as family, okay? And coming back home, we would pass by the church.
Yeah.
And she would just put her hand up and pray. And that was just something, that I noticed about her faith that never ceased to stop in her. Yeah. And passing forward to my teenage years, I struggle with between understanding Christianity and Buddhism. Buddhism is the national religion of Cambodia.
Okay.
My mother, she had respect for Buddhism, and I believe my dad did too. But I also knew that they ultimately respected Catholicism, Christianity, in general. But I said, well, the Cambodian people, they seem to think God is the Buddha, So, and then they call other figures God. So who is the head honcho, in this game,
Right.
So who is God? Well, so I would always go by the God that my mother's talking about. That's Jesus. And but still, I don't know where Jesus was either. So I started to, learn a little bit more about Christianity just through my friends, hang around with them. And I learned that, the disciplines and the precepts are very similar to Buddhism, but the difference, huge difference here, Buddhism is a DIY deal, do it yourself, Oh, they have like very good precepts, do not kill, abstain from killing, from sexual misconduct, from intoxication, things like that, very similar to Christianity. But here's to do it yourself. But how can you do it yourself? Here you have a savior, okay? Then I noticed other people that I came in contact with through, during my lifetime that, I didn't feel like they were practicing, they're being Christians, and I felt like, well, how my parents taught me, my mother especially, were so obedient to, to her, and we listened, we did what she asked us to do. But how come these kids are so demanding with their parents, What, I just didn't understand. But they, I said, well, they go to Christian school, Catholic school, but why are they behaving like this? So that's also, I was looking at the examples of what other kids, other kids' behavior, and not understanding the faith, So God was not on my mind, okay? So my heart knew He's always there, I respected, the existence of God. Because I respected my mother so much, and that's why, I never discounted the existence of God at all. Yeah.
Well, it's a good place for a break, I think. What an incredible story so far. So here you're in the States now, and understandably, the question of God and of a faith in Him is one that you would have had a lot of questions about. That's completely understandable given what has gone on in your life. So, but we'll come back and hear more about how those questions began to germinate and take root. And amazing stuff. So, again, thank you for joining us for this program. We're here with Phally Budock, and come back in a few minutes. We're going to hear more of her incredible story. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome back to the Journey Home program. This is the second half of our, we're hearing from the story of Phally Budock, an amazing story so far from her childhood in Cambodia and the very difficult, traumatic things she experienced there in the early part of her life. But we're coming back to your story. Now you're in the States, and you're wrestling with the question of God and of faith, and that's where we left off. So
right, and I started to, try to understand more, especially Buddhism and then Christianity. And I, would attend church, just to sit there and observe Catholic church. First one was St. John the Evangelist, across the street from where I lived in Silver Spring, Maryland. Just to sit there and just observe. And I had never been to a Buddhist temple before. And I started to, it was like my soul-searching moments,
Yeah.
And I would go to the temple and observe to see what kind of practices they're doing there. And asking my mom about it, and I remember she mentioning to me, well, Buddhism, there's one, the Cambodian, according to the Cambodian culture anyway, there's one holiday that she also, had a very big respect for. It's called Ancestors' Holiday. And she was telling me, well, what they do there, that you bring food and offer up the food to the monks, and the monks would chant for spiritual strength for the deceased. And when she said that, it really captured my heart, because I'm, thinking, okay, my dad, where's his soul now? My siblings and everyone else who died, where are they? Are they suffering somewhere?
Yeah.
And when I start to read about this ancestor holiday, this Cambodian tradition, it said that, souls, when you pass away, they're yearning for, things that, just as if they were alive, like clothing, they're out there in the cold and different realms of the universe. So I'm wondering, oh my gosh, where's my dad and my siblings? I don't want them to suffer. So I started, I would tell my sister, okay, let's go to the temple, during this time of the holiday and bring food and, offering the food up for the monks to chant, so to give them strength, where the souls are, without understanding, the intricacies of the practice.
Right.
And we would do that, once in a while. And it's also festive and fun, But then fast forward a little bit, something just, wasn't sitting right with me. Everything's going well in my life in terms of, money's fine, there's no sickness, anything. But I felt like something was missing, I needed something more. Then I got a phone call from a cousin of mine. She said, well, I found my oldest child who she thought died during the war. And now she found him, in Cambodia, so she had sponsored him over. And so she started telling me about Cambodia, and I asked her, well, how's the condition over there now? And she said, well, it's still struggling, but, it's moving and trying to, become a better nation. And this one, I said, you know what? I want to go with you to visit there next time. And this was 2004. And I had the courage to do that. My whole family, they almost had a heart attack. They said, no, you cannot go. Don't be foolish. You don't know, how the condition is. And they were so afraid, my husband included. But I said, no, I have to go. I felt like I needed to reconnect and to face the past, and also to learn what actually happened. How did this happen? So anyhow, after that, I started to go back 2 more times consecutive, the next 2 consecutive years. So later on, after I came back, I said, I have to do something about this. Wanted to start like a nonprofit or something to help these poor people that I witnessed all over the place. There, as soon as I stepped out the airport, it's horrible. But then my mother, she became very elderly and needing a lot of my assistance and the assistance of my siblings. So I decided to, put everything else aside and take care of her. And then got a big news in the family. My sister, she was the older one out of the 3 girls that survived the war. She was living in Florida, Orlando, Florida, got the news that she was diagnosed with cancer. And this devastated me so badly. I said, how could this be, She survived the war, and we made it through. She's the one who helped us, with the paperwork. My other sister and I, we were small. She was like my mom's right-hand person. And why now, at age 48, 49 at the time? So I got kind of like angry, like, God, where the heck are you, And so I tried to deal with that, but, it wasn't pleasant. And then 3 years later, my brother, who sponsored us to the States, was diagnosed with liver cancer. So the whole cycle of, this surprise happened again. And after that, that's when I really came and prayed to God. I, prayed to Jesus. The first time I think I came to the Lord was 2007. This was like right after the last time I came back from Cambodia. I asked him, whatever your will is for me, just help me with that. And then that was that. And then when my sister was diagnosed with cancer, I'm like, Jesus, okay, he's listening when I was praying to him, And so at this time, after my brother passed away, that's when I really started to sit down and kind of reflect on things. And one evening, when I was sitting, caring for my mother, she fell asleep. Before we were watching this mini-series on TV called AD the Bible Continues. And then my mother fell asleep, and I, continued watching, and I had a moment. And this was something that, no one could understand but you, who are experiencing this. Right. The part when he was carrying the cross, his head lifted up. And right that moment, my eye just locked onto his eyes, and it was like time just stood still. Mm-hmm. I was in a trance, literally, and I could feel him. I could feel my back was heavy and was like aching as if I was carrying that cross, And at that moment, I still remember, and I was like, tears just started to flow down my face uncontrollably. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't stop. And my mind thinking, what's happening to me? How come I can't move? And this for like a good few minutes that was happening. And when I finally came out of that, I shook myself off and I started to pray. And that's why I said, Lord, thank you. I understand, I understand what you went through, and help me, to come to know you. And I really pray my heart out that evening. Yeah. And that was my journey into the Christian faith. After that, I told my sister, and I believe I mentioned to my husband, but they were more like, I don't know what you're talking about type of thing, but I didn't press on that. But I said...
It's just amazing, though, because people come to Christ in so many different ways. But that, particularly in that connection of the suffering, of the God who comes to meet us and to enter into suffering with us, that's really powerful.
Right. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, what my sisters, my brothers suffered. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that was bad, but there's nothing compared to how you suffered, Lord, And
He was with
and
them.
you suffered for all of us, to take our sins. Mm-hmm. And that's when I prayed to him. I said, Lord, take care of my loved ones who passed on. Yeah. And I said to my sister, I said, Perry, we need to start going to church. And right away, she's like, yes, let's go. There was no hesitation on her part. So we started church hopping. I call it church hopping because there are so many denominations, and here I'm struggling with choosing which one to go with. We attended Baptist church, and it's always Catholic church is always in there, in the combination of church hopping. Yeah. And when I started to take my mom to a non-Catholic church, she said, why aren't we going to Catholic church? And I said, oh, did you want to go to the Catholic church? Did you just want to go to Catholic church? Because I thought, well, it's about Jesus, doesn't matter, But she said, no, we need to go to the Catholic church. And so we started to go there, just for her sake. Yeah. But I was still attending different, denominations outside of taking her to church. So I started to observe her worship in the church and how immersed she was in praying and receiving the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. And I just saw such change in her. Yeah. Just the whole glow. Mm-hmm. Physically and spiritually. Mm-hmm. She didn't talk about Cambodia in terms of, struggles, anything, like she did before. It was a constant thing, Since we came to the States, she had never unpacked her suitcases because her hope was always to go back and help those people. Wow. Yeah. And after this, she was just like totally healed.
At peace.
Very peaceful. And she would pray for Cambodia and just happily praying, And I remember in February 2017, sitting beside her at her bedside, and she said, don't forget, when I leave here, you continue to help Cambodia, the Cambodian people. Mm-hmm. Don't forget to pray to the Lord and ask for his help. Yeah. And when you go there, invite him along. She would say things like that. I'm like, wow. Yeah. She was really serious, Yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness. But I started to sense, wow, this is a big restoration and, in her life. So I called up the priest at at the parish that she was living near, St. Francis de Chantal. And I said, I think my mother needs to be baptized, because I asked her, if she had been baptized. She's like, well, I never asked my mother, but she remembered going to church when she was a young girl. Okay. So I said, well, to be safe, I'm going to get a priest over. And I guess he did like a reaffirmation for her, so that was considered full baptism. Right. So that was, a big healing for her, because she struggled a lot through her health. She went through health complications, heart condition, and a lot of things. But as far as my faith journey now, it's really powerful, because since I had that experience with the Lord, through that TV program, I knew for sure that I needed him. And I just started to read the Bible, from beginning to end. Before I just flipping through, I knew the Genesis and, just basic. Right. But now I'm like hooked, couldn't stop reading. Yeah. And attended different churches and wanted to be baptized now. And then I had this idea. I told my sister, okay, Perry, we're going to take a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And I saw this this tour, the Catholic tour, that was going in, June 2019. I said, we're going to go to that one, because one of the features was baptism. I said, I want to be baptized in the Jordan River like Jesus did, and that was so exciting to me. Like, I wanted to do everything, anything that Jesus did, And so, but that was kind of, 6 months away, but I felt like I need to be baptized. So I attended different churches, and the last one I came to was a United Church of Christ. And I was so immersed with the preaching. I said, oh my goodness, I think I belong here, because the preaching is just so awesome. It just touches my soul so deeply. The people were wonderful, very small congregation. It was very intimate, and I loved that. And that's something I didn't get from the Catholic Church. I noticed that, it's a lot of ritual. People leave there, and it's like there's no connection that I felt. And so I talked to the pastor there, and I said, can you baptize me? And she said, sure, and we talked about it, and she said, well, I can't do it because not until after May, because I'm going to be on leave on a sabbatical. And so I said, oh, okay. So during this time, this was like December 2018. Yeah. So I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, there's so many denominations. I just need to belong to a church. I really need communion with you. And one of the things that really pulled me, really captured me about Catholic Church, that one core thing, regardless of the lack of intimacy that I felt, was the Eucharist. Yeah. And that first week of December, the Protestant Church, United Church of Christ, they would give out communion, the bread and wine every first Sunday of the month. And I said to my sister, I said, we need to go there and receive this. And to me, I saw it as the same as the Eucharist at the Catholic Church. Right. So I believe with full heart. I received it. I said, in my heart, I prayed to the Lord. I said, thank you, Lord, for this body, blood, soul, and divinity. To me, it was that. But, the the Protestant, they didn't believe
Right.
that's just a symbol, but I believed it. And so when I prayed to the Lord, I said, I need to belong to a church. Next thing you know, after my mother passed away, I felt like I needed to go to church, daily mass. And so I attended daily mass for like a week that week. So Saturday, I said to myself, I'm not going to go to mass. I'm going to sleep in. But I couldn't sleep. Something just kept tugging me to, get up and, move. So I decided to go to church. So I got to St. Andrew's in Silver Spring, got there for the 9 o'clock mass. There's this display, a workshop for Stephen Ministry. Yeah. And so I was brought on to Stephen Ministry. Okay. It's open to all, Christians. And next thing I know, I met the pastor of the church of St. Andrew's, Father Dan Leary. Talked to him, and he asked me if I had been baptized. And I said, yes, in the Holy Spirit, because I saw other programs that, once you've been baptized in the Holy Spirit, you're good enough. You belong to Jesus, And so he said, no, but have you been confirmed? I said, no. And that's when I came into the church last year. Yeah, as Catholic, my sister and I both did. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yep.
What an amazing journey. A couple things I wanted to circle back on. One was, it's an interesting point that even when you were thinking about, you were had questions about Christianity, but you were reflecting on how there's the Buddhist tradition with the Feast of the Ancestors.
Yes.
So you had a sense throughout your life of even the communion of saints. I always find that really fascinating.
Yes.
That it's a very human instinct, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I now draw the connection because Cambodia is the only nation, the only Buddhist nation that has that ancestor holiday. Yeah. Because we venerate the ancestors, though we loved and passed on. Yeah. And then here in the Catholic Church, you have saints, And so it's like this connection there. Yeah. And another thing, Mother Mary, to me, oh my gosh, her connection between her and my mother is just so, it's like it touches me to the core. The fact that she witnessed her own son hanging on a cross. Yeah. Imagine anyone having to go through that, and my mother witnessing death, death after death of her own children, and having to bury with her own hands, one after another, trying to stay strong, for the rest of us. I said, oh my goodness. I felt what my mother felt and what Mother Mary felt. Yeah. And I said, the Catholic Church is in. And the fact that I need that healing from the Eucharist, there was no doubt. When I made that prayer to the Lord in December 2018, asking him to, lead me to a church that he wants me to, to go with, the Catholic Church always been there for me all along. The first church I ever attended was the Catholic Church, and I would attend, periodically. My husband's a cradle Catholic, and I would attend with him, here and there. But now, it's like, it's a sure thing. Yes, it's definitely a sure thing, and I feel like I found a treasure. And I did. Definitely.
Another amazing point in your journey was, again, that program you were watching, and you had that moment of connection, of the presence of God, and understanding God becoming man and entering into our suffering and bearing it for us and with us. Yes. And God's love through that. I guess the question is, with all the stuff that's gone on in your journey, you have that moment of connection that starts your Christian journey. How do you now look back and understand differently the mercy of God, even amidst that suffering, right. Intellectually?
Oh wow, it's so sure for me that He had been there all along, bringing us over. That's just so clear to me, And the suffering that he went through, the suffering we went through is not because of his will. That's the will of man, that's for sure, And, he's a gentle God, a loving God. That's why he gives us freedom, that free will to act, to choose, and ultimately to choose him. But if we don't know him, really know him, not know about him, but know him, how can we really come to him, And that's why, what I share with people is that when they ask me about my faith now, is this is something that you cannot, it's so, it's like finding a treasure that you have been looking for. If you're going through struggles, any kind, not just war, because we go through war every day within ourselves, we struggle. But he is the solution. He is the healing power that you need, and he is the God that created us in his image and likeness. And the war, those are circumstances that's not of his willing. That's us. That's our own affliction. Right there.
If there are people out there, and there are, people listening to the show who've heard your story, and whether they may or may have not have had those kinds of experiences, the external, the physical, the war, it may be internal, as you mentioned, but we have just about a couple minutes left here. Speak a word into their life, about how, especially if they don't know the Lord, what are some steps they can take to begin being open to that love and mercy that he has for them?
Well, I would say that, all of us need love and mercy. Just look at our own lives, within our own family, anywhere in life we struggle, right? We have conflict with our siblings, and we all need love. But the kind of love that we try to seek for ourselves, it's not sufficient. It passes. But the love that God gives you is beyond happiness. Because a lot of people tend to think, in this life, I need to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. But that depends on what goes on around you, the external. But God gives you joy, the joy that is beyond happiness. It lives inside of you. When you have that joy of Jesus Christ, it manifests outwardly and shows that happiness. And you just cannot describe. It's like, you're sick and you need a medicine to heal you, but there's a permanent medicine, It's that joy. You need that joy to give you peace, love, and happiness, and come to Jesus. That's the solution.
Well, and he fulfills all of our longings. Because even, as you said, the longing even for human communion, we're broken as humans, and our relationships are broken, sometimes in terrible, terrible ways, but we still even long for communion with our family, with our brothers and sisters. But it's through Christ that even those, again, looking back in your story, it's such the amazing faith of your mother, and even amidst all the tragedy your family experienced, the love in your family, the connections with your family, and the communion of saints, that it doesn't end.
No, at all. Not at all. And I believe she is now a saint. I don't know how much longer we have, but I know that she, the Lord appeared to her in 1987 in her dream. This was when she was struggling with, with pain and sorrow. And she dreamt the Lord, she was falling from the sky, and she almost hit bottom, and the Lord called her and said, "Don't let go, hold on to me tight." And she did. And as she held on to him, he ascended into heaven, and took her with him. And I remember that so vividly. Oh, wow.
Your mother, pray for us. What was your mother's name?
Deb.
Well, thank you for sharing her story and your story.
Thank you.
I know I'm very touched by it, and I know that so many people watching will be the same. So thank you so much, Phally.
Thank you for having me.
Bless you. And thank you for joining us for the Journey Home program. What a blessing we have to hear these amazing stories. So God bless you, and we'll see you again next week here on the Journey Home program.